He wasn't a shadow behind Hitler. He wasn't a faceless bureaucrat. He wasn't a silent executor of orders. He was flamboyant, charismatic, decorated, addicted. He turned war into theater, power into costume, and a collapsing empire into a personal playground of excess. While Germany burned, he feasted. While millions starved, he collected art, jewels, silk uniforms, and titles. This is not the story of a loyal Nazi. This is the story of a man who believed the Reich existed for him. This is the dark truth of Hermann Göring. Before he became a caricature of greed and decadence, Hermann Göring was a hero, not in myth. In fact, during World War I, he was one of Germany's most celebrated fighter aces, a decorated pilot, a successor to the legendary Red Baron himself, a man who flew not just to kill, but to be seen. Even then, the pattern was clear. Göring didn't fight for Germany alone. He fought for applause, for uniforms that shimmered, for medals that clinked, for rooms that fell silent when he entered. Power to Göring was never invisible. It had to be displayed. And when the war ended in defeat, humiliation, and collapse, Göring did not retreat. He reinvented himself. When Göring met Adolf Hitler in the early 1920s, he didn't see a madman. He saw opportunity. Hitler had ideology, rage, vision. But Göring had something Hitler lacked: social confidence, elite connections, and the instinct to perform power convincingly. He became Hitler's enforcer during the beer hall putsch, took a bullet to the groin, nearly bled to death. The wound changed everything. To numb the pain, doctors prescribed morphine, then codeine, then stronger narcotics. Göring survived the injury, but addiction moved in and never left. From that moment on, Hermann Göring's life followed two tracks: meteoric rise, slow internal decay, and the higher he climbed, the more rot he carried with him. When the Nazis seized power in 1933, Göring didn't wait for permission. He seized everything. Minister-President of Prussia, commander of the Luftwaffe, founder of the Gestapo, before handing it to Himmler. Reichsmarschall, a title created specifically for him. No other Nazi accumulated power so fast. No other Nazi lived so lavishly. While others whispered ideology, Göring ruled like a Baroque prince. He built Hall, a palace in the forest, filled with stolen art, marble halls, hunting trophies, tapestries, and gold. Not a residence, a shrine to himself. He wore custom-made uniforms no one else was allowed to wear. Silk-lined, metals stacked like armor. Colors chosen not for regulation, but for drama. Göring didn't just want authority, he wanted to look like power. As Europe fell under German occupation, Göring turned war into acquisition. Paintings, sculptures, jewels, furniture, entire collections ripped from Jewish families, museums, and private estates. He didn't hide it. He curated it. He walked through looted galleries like a connoisseur, selecting masterpieces for Hall, discarding the rest for sale or destruction. To Göring, culture was not sacred. It was decoration, a backdrop for his ego. While Hitler obsessed over ideology and destiny, Göring obsessed over possessions, and in doing so, revealed something critical. He didn't believe in the Reich's future. He believed in enjoying it while it lasted. As head of the Luftwaffe, Göring promised Hitler absolute dominance of the skies. He failed, spectacularly. Britain was not defeated, radar was underestimated, production was mismanaged, strategy was replaced with bravado. When the Luftwaffe collapsed during the Battle of Britain, Göring did not accept responsibility. He blamed his generals, his pilots, technical staff, weather, fate, anyone but himself. This was Göring's core flaw. He loved the image of power, but avoided the burden of accountability. And as the war turned against Germany, that flaw became fatal. By the late 1930s, Göring was no longer merely indulgent. He was chemically dependent. Doctors quietly adjusted his medication. Servants managed his doses. Closed aides watched his moods swing violently. At times, euphoric, theatrical, charming. At others, paranoid, sluggish, delusional. He gained weight rapidly. His movements slowed. His attention drifted. Yet he refused to step back. Power was the only drug stronger than morphine, and he needed both. As war consumed Europe, Göring continued to live as if history were a stage set built for his enjoyment. He hunted, he hosted banquets, he collected, he dressed. But beneath the silk and gold, something fundamental had cracked. He was no longer shaping events. He was reacting to them. And slowly, invisibly at first, Hitler stopped trusting him. Other men moved closer. Himmler, Bormann, Speer. Göring still held titles, still held palaces, still held weight. But the center of gravity had shifted. The golden hero of the Reich was becoming a liability. And Hermann Göring, drunk on power, narcotics, and illusion, did not see it coming. When Hermann Göring walked into a room, he didn't want respect. He wanted awe. Not the quiet authority of power, but the loud spectacle of it. Gold-braided uniforms, custom-made boots, metals layered so thick they clinked when he moved. Perfume, rings, silk scarves. Göring didn't dress like a soldier. He dressed like a monarch performing himself. And for a time it worked. Inside the Third Reich, power was a zero-sum game. Everyone competed for proximity to Hitler. Everyone feared losing relevance. Göring's strategy was visibility. If Hitler was the myth, Göring would be the spectacle orbiting it. He laughed loudly. He dominated conversations. He flattered shamelessly. He staged entrances like theater. At dinners, he told stories that painted himself as indispensable. At meetings, he exaggerated Luftwaffe's successes and minimized failures. In public, he played the confident warlord, relaxed, jovial, victorious. This wasn't arrogance alone. It was survival. Göring understood something fundamental. In Hitler's world, attention was power. And Göring made sure he was impossible to ignore. If Berlin was the capital of the Reich, Carenhall was Göring's private kingdom. Hidden in the forests north of Berlin, the estate expanded relentlessly. Marble halls, vaulted ceilings, hunting lodges, galleries. Inside, stolen Renaissance paintings, Dutch masters ripped from Jewish collections, tapestries taken from occupied palaces, gold, silver antiques, furs. Göring walked through Carenhall not as a caretaker, but as an emperor surveying tribute. Guests were stunned. Even fellow Nazis whispered that the excess was obscene. But Göring didn't care. To him, Carenhall was proof. He had won. Not the war, not history, life. Quick note, if you're still listening, you're exactly who this channel is for. If you want more WWE stories told this way, a quiet subscribe really helps. Now let's continue. By the early 1940s, Göring's addiction was no longer a secret. It was managed. Doctors adjusted dosages carefully. Aides tracked his intake. Servants ensured he was never without medication. Morphine calmed him, elevated him, blurred consequences. At times he was brilliant, charming, articulate, energized. At others he was bloated, slow, unfocused, irritable. His weight ballooned. His face swelled. His uniforms had to be redesigned. But Göring refused to see decay. Decay to him was something that happened to others. The turning point came in 1940, the Battle of Britain. Göring promised Hitler that the Luftwaffe would crush Britain. That air power alone would force surrender. That invasion would be unnecessary. It was bravado, and it failed. Radar neutralized German tactics. British pilots adapted. Losses mounted. When the Luftwaffe failed, Göring did what he always did. He denied reality. He blamed commanders. He blamed technology. He blamed timing. He never blamed himself. And Hitler noticed. For the first time, Göring's theater collided with consequence. Hitler didn't explode. He withdrew. Meetings grew shorter. Praise evaporated. Private jokes stopped. Men like Speer and Bormann gained influence quietly, efficiently, without spectacle. Göring still had titles, still had palaces, still had uniforms, but he was no longer central. The Reich was entering a phase that required discipline, efficiency, sacrifice. And Göring represented the opposite. Indulgence. 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 Hitler despised weakness, and Göring was becoming visibly weak. Göring refused to adjust. He continued hunting trips while cities burned, continued banquets while soldiers froze at the front, continued collecting art while the Reich hemorrhaged resources. He believed his past loyalty guaranteed his future. It didn't. Power under Hitler was conditional, and Göring forgot that. Worse, he underestimated how deeply Hitler resented failure, especially failure wrapped in silk. As influence slipped, Göring grew suspicious. He sensed whispers, felt glances linger, noticed invitations stop arriving. He responded the only way he knew how: more display, more performance, more excess. But excess without authority looks ridiculous, and ridicule is fatal in a dictatorship. Behind closed doors, Göring's confidence cracked. He increased his dosages, isolated himself in Hall, surrounded himself with sycophants. The peacock had grown too heavy to fly. By 1942, Germany was bleeding on multiple fronts. Stalingrad loomed. Allied bombing intensified. Resources thinned. The Reich needed grim managers. Göring was a relic of the victory phase, a symbol of early triumphs that no longer mattered. Hitler still tolerated him, but he no longer trusted him. And in the Third Reich, tolerance was a prelude to disposal. Göring didn't realize it yet, but he had passed the point of no return. The man who once embodied Nazi confidence was becoming an embarrassment, and the regime was preparing to move on without him. There is a moment in every dictatorship when loyalty stops mattering. For Hermann Göring, that moment had a name: Stalingrad. In late 1942, the German Sixth Army was encircled at Stalingrad, starving, frozen, cut off. The situation was catastrophic. Hitler asked Göring a single question: can the Luftwaffe supply the army by air? Göring didn't hesitate. Yes. He didn't consult logistics, didn't consult weather, didn't consult reality. He answered instinctively, as a performer protecting his image. And that answer doomed tens of thousands of men. The Luftwaffe could not deliver what was promised. Planes were shot down. Fuel ran out. Pilots froze mid-flight. The supply effort collapsed, and with it, Göring's credibility. Stalingrad was more than a military disaster. It was a psychological rupture. For the first time, Hitler faced undeniable failure, and Göring's voice was attached to it. Hitler didn't shout. He didn't rant. He went cold. The warmth was gone. The indulgence vanished. The jokes stopped. Göring noticed it immediately. In meetings, Hitler spoke past him. Instructions went to others. Decisions bypassed him. Göring was still present, but presence without influence is humiliation. For years, Göring had believed he was Hitler's heir. He had titles, seniority, public prestige. But after Stalingrad, something changed. Himmler grew bolder. Bormann tightened his grip on access. Speer became indispensable. They were efficient, relentless, unsentimental. And Göring was none of those things. He was indulgent, slow, unfocused. The Reich no longer needed spectacle. It needed control. And Göring represented chaos wrapped in silk. As his power waned, Göring's addiction intensified. Morphine numbed humiliation. Cocaine lifted despair. Barbiturates forced sleep. His doctors no longer treated him. They maintained him. His weight surged. His thinking dulled. His paranoia sharpened. He began seeing enemies everywhere. Every delay felt like betrayal. Every whisper felt personal. But the truth was simpler. The regime was moving on. Hitler despised weakness, and Göring had become visibly weak. He missed meetings, arrived late, forgot details, contradicted himself. Once Hitler snapped, "You live like a Roman emperor while the Reich bleeds." That sentence marked the end. Not publicly, not officially, but emotionally. Göring was no longer a comrade. He was an embarrassment. In 1943, Göring still held grand titles. But titles without authority are theater. His Luftwaffe was stripped of control. Production decisions went elsewhere. Operational command bypassed him. He remained Reichsmarschall in name only. A relic, a reminder of better days. A man kept around out of habit, not trust. After the failed July 20th assassination attempt on Hitler, paranoia consumed the regime. Everyone was suspect, even Göring. Though he had remained loyal, his absence from the bunker during the crisis was noted. Himmler whispered. Bormann recorded. Files thickened. Göring felt the noose tighten. And for the first time in his life, he panicked. As Berlin collapsed in April 1945, Hitler retreated into the bunker. Göring was in Bavaria. According to a 1941 decree, Göring was Hitler's designated successor if the Führer became incapacitated. Göring sent a message asking for clarification. Was he now to assume leadership? It was a legal question, but in Hitler's paranoid mind, it sounded like betrayal. Hitler exploded. He accused Göring of treason, ordered his arrest, stripped him of all titles, declared him a traitor to the Reich. The man who had once stood at the center of power was discarded with a signature. SS guards arrived at Göring's estate. They took his medals, his insignia, his authority. They left him alive, but finished. Göring was placed under house arrest, alone, drug-dependent, obese, terrified. The peacock had lost its feathers, and the empire he had exploited was dying without him. In the final days of the Reich, Göring waited, not for victory, not for redemption, for survival. He had always been adaptable, always pragmatic. When Hitler died, Göring did not follow him. He chose life, and that choice would define how history judged him. When the Third Reich collapsed, most of its architects vanished into shadows. Some fled, some hid, some chose suicide. Hermann Göring did something different. He surrendered, as if making an entrance. Stories like this are rarely told all the way through. If you want more deep World War II narratives, consider subscribing. All right, back to the story. On May 6, 1945, Göring approached American forces in Bavaria. He didn't arrive as a broken man. He arrived dressed, custom uniform, medals, luggage packed with luxury items, suitcases filled with morphine, jewelry, silk, and personal effects. He introduced himself calmly. I am Hermann Göring, not a prisoner, not a fugitive, a name meant to command gravity. American officers were stunned. This was not the image they expected. He was obese, bloated, but confident, still performing power, even as it evaporated. The Allies quickly realized something critical. Göring was severely addicted. They cut him off. No morphine, no cocaine, no barbiturates. The withdrawal was brutal. Sweating, shaking, hallucinations, rage. For the first time in decades, Göring faced reality without chemical insulation. And something unexpected happened. He improved. His mind sharpened. His speech clarified. His confidence returned. Not drug-fueled, but calculated. He began preparing, not for freedom, for trial. When Göring entered the courtroom at Nuremberg, he didn't look like a defeated criminal. He looked like a man stepping back into relevance. He smiled. He joked. He commanded attention. Other defendants shrank. Göring expanded. He corrected prosecutors, interrupted translators, explained Nazi ideology with chilling clarity. He became the unofficial leader of the defendants. Even guards noticed it. When Göring spoke, others listened. This was not remorse. This was mastery of the room. Göring knew the rules had changed. Uniforms no longer mattered. Titles meant nothing. Now power came from narrative. So he reframed himself. Not a fanatic, but a pragmatist. Not a murderer, but a statesman. Not a criminal, but a patriot who lost control. He admitted some crimes strategically, denied others confidently. He distanced himself from genocide, blamed Himmler, blamed bureaucrats, blamed chaos, but never blamed himself. And disturbingly, at times he sounded convincing. There were days when Göring dominated the courtroom. He exposed inconsistencies, mocked vague accusations, forced prosecutors to clarify. Observers were alarmed. This was not supposed to happen. The architect of terror was becoming charismatic again. For a moment, history seemed to wobble. Then the evidence arrived. Signed orders, recorded meetings, transcripts, correspondence, proof of economic plunder, exploitation, deportation logistics, Coordination with SS leadership. The walls closed in. No amount of rhetoric could erase paper. No performance could outshine documentation. Göring felt it. For the first time, his confidence fractured. On October 1st, 1946, the judgment was delivered. Guilty on all major counts. Crimes against peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity. Sentence: death by hanging. Göring listened calmly. No outburst, no collapse. Just calculation. He had lost the stage, but not the final act. Göring refused to be humiliated. He would not hang like a common criminal. Somehow, through bribery, deception, or hidden preparation, he acquired a cyanide capsule. The irony was absolute. The man who lived in excess chose a clean, controlled exit. On the night of October 15th, 1946, he swallowed the poison. Within minutes, he was dead. No rope, no scaffold. One final decision, one last assertion of autonomy. Göring escaped the gallows, but he did not escape judgment. History stripped him of costume, rank, and spectacle. What remained was simpler and uglier. A man who loved power more than responsibility, luxury more than truth, image more than consequence. He did not believe in the Reich. He believed in himself. And when that belief collapsed, he chose death over humiliation. History prefers monsters. Monsters are easy to condemn, easy to isolate, easy to destroy. Hermann Göring was not a monster, and that is precisely why he matters. For decades, Göring has been remembered as a grotesque figure. Obese, drug-addicted, flamboyant, corrupt. A cartoon of decadence. This version is comforting because it suggests that evil announces itself loudly, that it looks ridiculous, that it can be recognized and rejected on sight. But Göring's true danger lay elsewhere. He was intelligent, highly social, charismatic, adaptable. He could speak gently, laugh easily, convince persuasively. He did not scream ideology, he normalized it. Unlike Hitler, Göring was not driven by obsessive ideology. He did not believe in destiny. He did not believe in racial prophecy. He did not believe in sacrifice. He believed in reward. That made him flexible, pragmatic, and profoundly dangerous. Göring didn't commit crimes because he hated victims. He committed them because they benefited him. Power, wealth, luxury, status. Genocide was not his passion, but it was an acceptable byproduct. And that distinction matters, because it reveals a darker truth. The most destructive figures in history are often not fanatics, but opportunists. Göring never designed gas chambers, never pulled a trigger, never stood in a camp. But he authorized plunder, signed economic decrees, normalized theft, legitimized exploitation. He turned war into acquisition, and that made mass murder administratively possible. He didn't need cruelty, he needed comfort. And comfort has a way of silencing conscience. At Nuremberg, Göring did not plead insanity. He did not beg forgiveness. He did not deny everything. He argued, because argument implies legitimacy. He wanted history to see him not as a criminal, but as a participant in a tragic process. This was not arrogance, it was strategy. If he could normalize himself, he could dilute guilt. And for a moment, he almost succeeded. That should terrify us. Göring's suicide is often described as defiance. It wasn't, it was consistency. He had lived his entire life avoiding accountability, avoiding discipline, avoiding consequence, avoiding restraint. Hanging would have stripped him of dignity, so he escaped. One last luxury, one last choice, one last refusal to submit, not heroic, predictable. Hermann Göring forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality. Evil does not always come screaming. Sometimes it arrives smiling, wearing fine clothes, offering efficiency, promising stability, delivering comfort. Sometimes it looks like success. Sometimes it looks like confidence. Sometimes it looks like someone who never truly believes, but goes along because it's profitable. That is the Göring archetype, and it repeats. Post-war narratives loved mocking Göring because ridicule neutralizes fear. A ridiculous villain is less threatening than a plausible one, but Göring was plausible, and that is why he had to be simplified. If we accept him as merely grotesque, we avoid asking the harder question, how many systems are enabled by people who don't hate, but benefit? Hermann Göring was not the Reich's brain. He was not its soul. He was its enabler. The man who turned ideology into lifestyle, power into privilege, violence into reward. And that role, more than fanaticism, keeps atrocities running. Hermann Göring did not fail because he was weak. He failed because he was hollow. He stood for nothing beyond himself. And when the structure that fed him collapsed, there was nothing underneath. No belief, no remorse, no redemption, only performance. And when the audience left, he chose darkness. If this story unsettled you, it should, because the most dangerous figures in history are rarely the loudest. They are the ones who adapt, who benefit, who smile while the system rots. We uncover these buried World War II stories every week, not to shock, but to understand how power truly decays. If you value this kind of deep historical storytelling, consider subscribing. Some histories are erased because they are too simple. Others are erased because they are too revealing.